So I would just like to introduce our four panelists here today who span in different types of roles and organizations. You will get to hear a little bit about their career pathways in AI and hopefully inspire you on your own journeys for your next internship or full-time role search. I have a few questions to start, but also please start by putting in your own questions for the panelists here today in the Q&A section, and we'll try and get to as many as possible before we get into our speed networking. So without further ado, I'll introduce our panelists. So Wendy and Jawad, welcome back to the stage. We heard them speak a little bit earlier. I would also like to welcome Valli Subasri, who is a graduate researcher at the Hospital for Sick Children. She is a PhD candidate at the University of Toronto, and where she leverages genomics and machine learning to understand the clinical heterogeneity of pediatric cancers and develop risk prediction models for personalized patient management. She was recently an applied machine learning intern at Vector Institute, where she worked on addressing distribution shifts and biases to ensure the responsible deployment of clinical machine learning models. Previously, she completed an honors Bachelor of Science in Biomedical Science and Computer Science from Western. We also have Immanuel Tacky, who's a data scientist, Canadian Tire, here with us. He is at one of Canada's largest retailers, and he also has a professional education background, including a Bachelor of IT Management from Ryerson and a Master of Management in AI from Queen's University at Smith School of Business, which is also a Vector Recognized Master's program. He also has a previous 8 years of complementary experience in IT consulting in the not-for-profit sector, and now works on loyalty recommendation engines for Canadian Tire's loyalty customers. So welcome to all of our panelists here today. Why don't we get started with some introductions so you can hear a little bit more about your roles, which span different applications of AI as well as different sectors. We'll start with Immanuel. Can you share a little bit about your current role, what your role looks like within the context of your organization, and then an example of an AI application that you're currently working on?
All right. So, as Joanna said, I'm a data scientist at Canadian Tire. I currently work on the loyalty recommendations engine. So, if any of you have ever used the Triangle app for Canadian Tire, we have a bunch of offers that we give to our loyalty customers across various banners such as Canadian Tire, Marks, Sports Check, Atmosphere, Party City, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a great way for customers to stay engaged with the company and also get certain discounts on their favorite products and items. And so my team's tasked with developing the recommendations for those offers and being able to create a personalized offer for each customer. And so essentially, what I do, I basically develop features that increase the personalization for these recommendations, and that's pretty much what I do from a day-to-day basis, and basically do some A/B testing to see how these features work, and using Bayesian statistics just to see how maybe there's some lift here or there, and yeah, so that's what I do from a day-to-day basis, just using recommendation engines. So.
Really interesting stuff. Over to you, Valli. Could you give a quick introduction about you and your current role, a bit about your team, and then something that you're working on right now?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. As Joanna mentioned, I'm a graduate researcher at Sick Kids in U of T. And so what I mainly do on a day-to-day basis is leverage genomics and ML to understand the clinical heterogeneity of pediatric cancers. So we use DNA that we've sequenced and other molecular markers, as well as clinical information, to build risk prediction models to identify, when a patient will develop a certain malignancy, what type of tumor they might get, or like when they will pass away. So they're kind of a broad spectrum of different prediction tasks that I work on. And then the second aspect of it is, like, now that we have this model, how do we actually ensure the responsible deployment of it? So that is more on the side of looking at distribution shifts, fairness, and evaluating how that model performs in a real life deployment setting. So one example of a project that I worked on where, and I'm actively working on this and doing this, is we use DNA methylation data to predict early onset of primary tumors in patients with Li-Fraumeni syndrome. So Li-Fraumeni syndrome is a cancer predisposition syndrome. It's really, really sad. These individuals have this mutation that predisposes them to kind of a lifetime risk of developing cancer, and they can develop cancer at all different times throughout their life. So really early on in life, from the age of like 2 years to later on in life to like 16, 20 years of age. So knowing when they actually will develop cancer is really important to surveillance and risk stratification. And so that is one of the prediction problems I work on, is actually building a model to do that. And now we're in the process of evaluating it and deploying it.
Really interesting work. Thank you, Valli, for sharing. I also, Valli, we can't see your video. It says it's on, but we can't see it. So just a little flag. But I'll move on to the next question while we're troubleshooting that. All of you were in very different places in your career 5 years ago. So, Immanuel, you hadn't started your master's degree yet. Wendy, you weren't yet in a manager role in AI. So, why don't you share a little bit about your own career pathway since graduating from post-secondary, and maybe a piece of advice you would have to offer your former self 5 years ago, having been through what you've been through now. So, Wendy, why don't you get started?
Yep, absolutely. So my own career journey, definitely I graduated from undergrad as an electrical engineer. So I actually spent the first couple of my years of my career running software projects and being a coder. In that process, I realized data was really, really cool and really, really impactful. So I made a career switch. So I did a lot of data analytics. I was a data scientist, and finally, over the past year and a half, kind of started leading a team of data scientists, kind of to solve these problems, and became a manager. So I think one piece of advice was definitely, like exploring all the different options out there. I probably wish I could have gone into data a little bit earlier, but at the same time, like all the experiences that I've accumulated in the different roles really helped me actually get to where I'm at today and understand all the different pieces of data science, of the business, and how to connect that all together.
That's great advice. How about you, Emmanuel? You did a bit of a pivot. So you mentioned you're working in IT consulting. How has that changed the last 5 years? What advice do you have to offer?
Yeah, so I was doing IT consulting in the nonprofit space, and after a while, I did realize that I wanted to do something maybe a little bit more technical than that. So I was searching around, and then I think it was about 2019, I came across data science, and I realized like data was really like the next wave of innovation and things that I would like to be a part of. And so from there, I think one of the best things that really helped me was being able to get a master's degree in AI. I know some people are not always, pro education or pro degrees, but it really helped me because back when I was doing boot camps and taking every single data science course online, it was really helping in terms of my marketability. And so once I was able to get that degree and get that foundational knowledge, it really helped. And I think one piece of advice I would give to like my former self or anybody who's here, while you're in school, don't waste that time. That's actually the time when you're supposed to be looking. Because if you, like a lot of companies, they have certain targets of people that they're trying to get. So like they have um, new graduates, they have students, and those are the perfect times to get the experience that you need to eventually land the entry level role or the other role you're looking for. So that's the type of advice I would give to everyone. So.
That is great advice. A lot of students think you wait until you're almost about to graduate, but that's not how you should do it. So let me move on to the next question, given the time. But Jawad, why don't we pass it over to you to share about some of the currently available opportunities at organization for job seekers in AI, and what are some of the qualities, either technical or non-technical, that you look for in an ideal candidate?
Thanks for the question. I'm just think the very first thing we look at is the seniority level for which the person is being hired. So I'll start with last year we hired many senior MLEs as well as MLEs. And so when we are looking at machine learning engineer roles, I think, as Manuel said, having a grad school degree helps. And this, I mean, in our case, the use cases are very applied AI use cases. So we are looking for people who if a person has expertise in NLP, then we would expect them to have some, understanding of transformers or anything. But even so what I personally gauge candidates on is the conceptual understanding. If they understand how back propagation works, how what are the pros and cons of different things in the neural network back and forth. So the complex concepts can be built on top of that. I've been through this journey. I just knew feed-forward networks and then started using RNNs, and then you build that understanding. So having that foundational concepts is important. If we send that take home, a candidate has applied like 10 different algorithms, SVMs, decision trees, we'd want to know how does a decision tree work actually, what is the working principle of SVM. So this is the recruitment process which we tend to follow. For the senior roles, for people who have 3-4 years of experience, we look for ability to lead projects individually, making those choices when you have to, and having this ability to tie business problems to the actual ML problems. So one thing I've learned over the time, which I might also have been guilty of, is something that so if I am a machine learning engineer, definitely I would want to apply ML to any just make it work. But I think with time and experience, I've started to look at it as a toolbox which I have. But if a problem can be solved by an easier way, I would not want, if a problem can be solved by sequence tagging, we would try to avoid using sequence to sequence model for that. So these are or if a problem can be solved simply by a non-learned approach, then why are we going for learned approach? So yeah, just those things. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely a few things that I can consider when applying at Loblaw. Valli, there's very different roles because on your team, they're mostly focused on AI research. Can you share a little bit about what you find personally valuable in an ideal team member?
Yeah. So yeah, like you mentioned, I'm not sure if my camera is working, so hopefully I fixed that now. But from it's a very different, obviously, perspective coming from research. So I think one of the big things is within a technical role, we really value technical skills, which we obviously should, but in the context of something like research and something more interdisciplinary with health ML, we are looking for things that are, again, more interdisciplinary and where you have those soft skills. So being able to communicate really complicated topics and algorithms and problems to a diverse set of audiences, whether it be a clinician or an ML scientist or a hospital CEO or whoever it is. So that's a really valuable skill, I think, that is really undervalued in ML. And then also, obviously, just the technical skills, and then project experience. I think that's something to show that you can bring an idea from conception to deployment to the end of kind of the workflow. So those are some key things. And then from soft skills perspective, like being collaborative, being able to network and work with different types of people is also very important too.
Really great advice. Wendy, as you're in a management role, can you share a little bit about what you look for in an ideal candidate when you're looking at, let's say, a candidate's portfolio or a job application? What would make a candidate stand out?
Yeah, 100%. In fact, I think we hired over 20 data scientists and machine learning engineers last year. So we went through a big process of going through candidates. I think a couple things that really makes a candidate stand out. Obviously, a solid technical foundation is kind of the start. But I think really what brings a candidate out is kind of their soft skills. So their communication skills, their ability to actually connect the business problem to the machine learning solution. And also their ability to learn. AI is a really fast space. Things become outdated very quickly. So a passion and ability to really pick things up as things go is something that we really look for.
Great. And how about you, Immanuel? When you're looking at candidate or a teammate, what stands out for you?
I would say that it's probably like having an insatiable appetite for learning. That's really key. I feel in this space because, as Wendy was saying, so AI is a very fast space. There's so many things, developments being made all the time in terms of just like the deep learning space. Like that space grows so much. There's NLP models being created every single day, and so just being able to have that aptitude for learning, I feel like is great. And then also having that foundation, um, whether it's from your education or whether it's from your pet projects, or maybe you have an established GitHub profile, all these things can really help just factoring into how invested you are into the field and whether you're a good candidate. So.
Great advice. Really helpful to have a portfolio. Speaking of the learning and the landscape and insatiable appetite, I'll move on to my next question is how do you stay on top of AI? Because AI is a growing field that's changing every day. There's new technologies emerging. And there's also a comment here, or a question about what projects people should be working on to enhance their profile. So I'll pass it off to Valli. What do you do personally to stay on top of these changes and trends and stay alert of what's happening in AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a couple different things. I think one thing is like read really broadly. I think sometimes people focus on a very specific niche, and it's really important to read broadly to understand concepts and bring concepts from different fields to your topic of interest. Attending workshops, conferences, whether or not you're still in academia or you're still in industry is still really valuable. And then again, like discussing with different people, getting ideas from different people, I think. And the last thing that I want to mention, which I think sounds a bit funny, but I think is actually underrated, is Twitter. I honestly like find so many interesting things on Twitter, so many interesting papers, ideas, like just, yeah, Twitter's great.
That's a really interesting take, and I've heard that a lot too about using Twitter to stay on top of research and what's happening. Jawad, do you have any additional insights to offer?
Just use just Twitter and just following some folks on LinkedIn and some companies like Open. I think I get information from LinkedIn as well. But also, I think it's important to how to filter out papers. Like there's just so much, and yeah, just I use LinkedIn and Twitter.
Great. In line with the question that Mohammed asked, is there something specific that students should be working on in their programs while they're in program that will help them stand out? So Wendy, I'll throw it over back to you.
Yeah, 100%. I think like whenever it's projects like from within school and also, kind of like as a side personal project, normally I think what's really impressive, again, it's really when the passion comes out, when they took the project in a very unique way and, they applied it to a cool application. Really, something that, people are passionate about. It's like, oh, like I worked on this for like 7 days on my own time just because it's so cool. That's, I think, something that we love to hear. From an application perspective, like obviously if it is something that's related to industry, it definitely helps. But at the same time, right, if it's just, something that's a music recommendation or, finance and things like that, I think it's still very helpful as well.
Sounds great. And Immanuel, over to you. I know that you were in a management AI program, which is a very different curriculum and setup than some of the other programs here today. What projects do you think really helped you stand out?
I feel so in terms of projects that really helped me stand out. So we had a capstone project. I'm not sure everybody has that opportunity, but it's usually where you get the opportunity to work with an actual employer in the industry and solve one of their AI problems. So that was something I was able to do, where we were able to create like a labeler for surveys for for the client we were working with, using models. So that was a project that really helped. And just like Wendy was saying, having personal projects, I feel like is a really great way to show people that you're really invested into the space, and that can really help you stand out.
Yeah, that's great. And last but not least, I'll throw it over to Valli, who has done an internship for us. So it's a little bit of a plug for our internship program as well as the benefits of internships. In your experience, how do you find that doing something like a capstone or an integrated learning opportunity is beneficial for you?
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity. I think it exposes you to, something different. Like, for example, when I did my internship, um, I had never worked with EHR data before, and time series modeling. And so that was really cool that I got exposed to that. And then also, there's a big difference also from an academic and industry perspective, from a software engineering and ML ops perspective. So that was really nice to see. And like reinforce that that is really important. I think that is something academia is missing, that sort of structure. Yeah, I think, and then also just meeting new people, different opportunities. I was exposed to like the MLOps World Conference and other conferences that aren't, again, very present in academia. So I think it's a very valuable thing to reach out and do kind of these different capstone projects, different internships and things like that.
Great. Thank you, Valli. On that note, I think that's all the time we have for questions here today, but really thanking all our panelists for sharing about their own journeys and their advice. Hopefully it's inspired some students in our audience and they'll take that away and improve their portfolios and make sure they stand out on their application packages for when they apply to your organizations. I'm going to pass it over back to Sam, who will share more about the speed network session that is starting up next. But thank you everyone for joining and hearing all of our insights and to all our panelists.